Hi everyone and welcome. I'm Gabrielle Martin and it's a pleasure to have you with us for the first episode of Open Your Eyes to the Universe for 2022. Now look, I hope you've enjoyed the festive season and that 2022 is a year of continued spiritual empowerment. Here the team wish you good health and many perfect moments for you, your family and your friends throughout this new year. If you're joining our program for the first time, Open Your Eyes to the Universe is a series of contemporary talks, conversations, open-eyed meditations, and interviews with people who inspire and uplift others by sharing their wisdom, their insights, and their experiences. So, 2022, and tonight we're in the company of Dr. Tjanara Goreng, and our topic is Spiritual Journey of a First Nations Woman. Dr. Tjanara is Waka Waka Woolly Woolly traditional owner from central Queensland. She was born in the outback at Longreach in central western Queensland. But before I introduce Dr. Tjanara more fully, I'd like to invite her to do a welcome to country.
In the namin tutumo beranu, Goreng in the namin tutumo beranu, Goreng in the namin tutumo beranu, Gaya mama rangu and jagungungayung, jagungungayung, jagungungayung. Woo! In the language of my mother, Waka Waka Woolly Woolly, that's a song that says to everybody, come be with us, come and join us and follow us and come and learn about the law and learn about life and how to live it. So I invite you to this seminar from wherever you are in the world and welcome you to this country and acknowledge that today I am sitting on the lands of the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri people, and that I'm a Waka Waka Woolly Woolly traditional owner from central Queensland. And wherever you are in the country, on the lands of that nation, I'd like you to just consider and think who they are and thank them for looking after country for thousands and thousands of years so that we now have the benefit and to get to enjoy the country of First Nations people. And to those overseas, if you are overseas on First Nations land, also to remember them as our brothers and sisters. Thank you. Halia.
Thank you, Dr. Tjanara. That was indeed a very exquisite welcome to country. Thank you for that. Now, look, viewers, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Tjanara so that you get to know her more fully before she starts her conversation with us tonight. She's a poet and she's also an author of a few books, notably A Long Way from No Go, which was published in 2018. She's an academic teacher and researcher with a PhD in sacred leadership, which was published in 2021. And Tjanara has held numerous academic posts. She's also worked in the public sector. Presently, she's based in Canberra and is self-employed as a transformational leadership consultant. On the outer level, Dr. Tjanara is talented in change management, educational consulting, management consulting, environmental consulting, executive coaching, strategic planning, and negotiation. Her inner world is enriched with a spiritual journey as a First Women's Nation, and she has been a student with the Brahma Kumaris since the early 1980s, studying and teaching meditation. I know Tjanara in this capacity. I also know her as a proud grandmother and as a gifted artist. And in this episode of Open Your Eyes to the Universe, Tjanara is going to share her insights and her experiences from her spiritual journey as a First Nations woman. And viewers, as always, we welcome your questions and your comments. So please just pop them in the chat box and we'll have time to pitch them later tonight. So Tjanara, it's wonderful to have you with us on Youniverse. Thanks for joining. And as you know, my Tūranga Waiwai, the place where I stand, my birth home, is Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I can remember you visiting me there before I came to Australia 11 years ago. So I'd like to say tēnā koe, Tjanara. I'm looking forward to listening to you, and I know our viewers are too. Nai mai, a very warm welcome.
Oh, Halia. Well, Palya, thank you so much for that. Such a sweet introduction, and I'm very grateful for that. It's, of course, I have known you for some time, and of course, that's been an amazing, wonderful journey as well. So perhaps I'll tell the story. Seeing my story today is about my journey in spiritual life. And of course, that being the most important thing, spiritual intelligence and connecting to the spirit world, and certainly in First Nations culture. But my spiritual life did not start out as entirely as a First Nations woman. So I was born into what is an occupied country, of course, colonised Australia in 1958, in a part of Queensland, which was, I would say, quite racist and backward, and Aboriginal people lived in very oppressive times. My parents lived in on a property called Nogo, and also near a town called Longridge, and so did my extended family between Winton and Longridge, and Rockhampton on the coast where my mother was born, she being the daughter of a Waka Waka grandmother and grandfather, and Waka Waka grandfather and Woolly Woolly grandmother. And a very interesting story there, which I won't go into. But of course, my great-grandfather, who was her grandfather, met the first white people that came to his country, which was Waka Waka land, and he married a Woolly Woolly woman. And so my mother grew up with them for most of her childhood, and as a result learned her culture, her language, and really lived in the bush with grandfather and did not really go into town very much. She only had a short education of the first 3 years of school, but was a very bright and clever woman. And she maintained our language and our culture and the spiritual traditions and ceremonial knowledge that grandfather and grandmother taught her. However, when she was a young woman, she met my father, and they moved to Longridge, and they made a decision that because they had lived in a very difficult time as Aboriginal people with white settlement, that they would make sure that their children gained an education. And so they set about working. They had 2 jobs most of my life, and they sent us all to Catholic schools. So my first introduction, of course, was, you know, my mother doing those cultural things that were important to us before I became, I guess, age of school. Grade 1 was 5 years of age, around about then. And in central Queensland, it was a very it was like the South of America, really very strict, racist, segregated apartheid system. Aboriginal people in Queensland lived in what we call concentration camps without the barbed wire. So we were segregated from white culture. Many people in white culture didn't know that First Nations people lived in such conditions. And of course, we visited many of our relatives who lived on the mission. Back in those days, you could be forced to go and live on a mission, and you had to get permission to leave it from white authority. And it was a very difficult time. My parents held down their jobs because that was the only way that you really could not be forced if you had a job. And we all had passes. So in Queensland, Aboriginal people had to carry passes, and we had exemptions from having to live on the mission. So in a way, you know, that early spirituality of our lives was very segregated, and it was done in secret because Aboriginal people got shot for practicing their cultural traditions and their spiritual life. So my mother only spoke language and did ceremony with us when there were no white people around, and usually when we were out in the bush a long way away from white people, and usually when there was a group of us. So that happened early in my life. And then, of course, we went to Catholic schools, and we were forced to become Catholic in a way. We were Christianized. And when you go to a Catholic school, you have to enter the Catholic religion, be baptized, confirmed, communion, all of those things. And so my love of ritual and ceremony was really embraced in the Catholic Church. I didn't really like the hypocrisy of the way people acted in the Catholic Church. I was subjected to childhood sexual abuse and by priests, and so I knew a great deal about hypocrisy through those people in the Catholic Church. And so as a result, I never really believed everything they said. And Mum used to always say, you know, those Catholics, they don't know everything there is to know about the world, and you should really follow your own traditions. And so, you know, I endured that for 18 years of school, I guess. Went to Catholic boarding schools. My 7 brothers and sisters and I all went away to boarding schools because my parents were determined for us to get out of the poverty they grew up in and to live good lives. So in a way, they saved us from our education, and their sacrifice saved us from the sort of life that they didn't have because they couldn't have those things. And I was always very grateful for that. Of course, when I left Catholic school, I went to university, which was a Catholic university at the time. And it wasn't until I came to Canberra and met my husband that I made a decision that I would decondition myself from the Catholic Church. And it was around about this time that I started to think about spiritual things that had deeper meaning. And I met a lot of First Nations people in Canberra when I came here in 1978. And as a result, I met people from all around Australia, and I worked in Indigenous affairs. So I met a lot of elders, and I met a lot of people who had high spiritual knowledge of our culture. And I sat with them and learned from them. And after some time, at the age of 21, I was adopted by a very famous Aboriginal man who's now passed away, who became my adopted grandfather. And in our culture, when you lose your grandmother and your grandfather, it's important that some other family or clan group adopt you so that you can go through your cultural ceremonial journeys. And by the time I was 21, I started thinking about wanting to do that. And I asked my mother what I should do, and she sent me to up to some family members up in the Cape, and I spent some time with them. But then when I came back down and went to Canberra, I spent a lot of time, you know, at the feet of these people who knew a lot of knowledge. And so I gained a lot of knowledge from all around the place, but specifically from this old man and his niece, who has since just passed away. They're both really old people, and they've passed away in the last 5-7 years at the ages of in their 80s, 90s. And Kumanara Randall is his name, but he's famous for a film called Kanyini and for Brown Skin Baby, and being the oldest stolen generations person. He was stolen in the early part of the 20th century from his mother. And his niece, Jikatu, had never met a white person until she was 16, and she was a senior Anangu woman. They both lived at Murajulu near Uluru. And so I started to go out and visit them in Uluru for many years from that time on, and got to know their culture. So they taught me things that, you know, I couldn't learn from my own grandparents because they were no longer alive. And in fact, as part of my PhD, I wrote about the spiritual journey of how that happens in traditions before white people came here. That is also the case, and how that helped me recover a lot and do a lot of healing. So my spiritual cultural life has been very healing for me, and really it's been the only thing that saved me, because as a 18, 19-year-old and in my 20s, I got quite involved with drugs and alcohol because I had been sexually abused and I had not done any work or thought about it. Basically, you bury it and you don't think you can do anything about it. So, you know, to deal with those feelings, I drank and took drugs, and I enjoyed it. And I lived a lifestyle where that's what I did. I married early in my 20s, and that was the sort of social life in my world. And so it didn't interfere with my ability to do my job, but it certainly interfered with my ability to be the kind of spiritual person that I wanted to be, with like deep meaning in my life. And it was towards the end of my 20s, really, that even though I was following this sort of cultural traditions, I was still sort of, you know, smoking marijuana and drinking alcohol to excess. And it wasn't until I was about 28, 29, and I'd come back from Uluru after the handback, and I had a real epiphany at that time and decided to start to seek something deeper. And it was around that time I'd actually had a child as well. My daughter was born during this time, and that also catapulted me into a space of wanting to do something more meaningful and more deep with my spiritual life. So I had a cultural life, you know, I had a good working life, good professional life. I married well, and I had, you know, money, mortgage, all of those kinds of things, but it was really quite empty inside. And so I started to, you know, one day I opened the fridge and the only thing in the fridge was 3 bottles of wine. And I thought, is this my life? And I changed my career because I felt like working in the public service all the time just didn't have a deep enough meaning for me. And I went to work in a women's refuge, and I felt more close because I was working with my own community, and it was there that I learned about addiction and alcoholism and started to not drink and take drugs. I stopped doing all of that, and I started to enter into recovery for the abuse as well, and started to see a therapist. And I had a bit of I was walking the dog around Canberra. I lived in Forest in Canberra back then, and I was walking the dog around the block one day, and you know, every now and then I would walk past this house that was on the main street, and it had a sign up, you know, Raj Yoga meditation. And I thought maybe meditation will be really good for me. Maybe that's what I need to relax and get my mind into a good space, because I'd become vegetarian, you know, I gotten into hatha yoga. I stopped drinking and taking drugs. I got really healthy. I used to run all the time. I was really, you know, healthy mother, young mother. I was only, you know, 25. And I went and knocked on the door just on a whim. I sort of had the baby and the pram and the dog, and I knocked on the door in a whim, and this guy opened the door with a white shirt on, buttoned up to here, and this strange look in his eyes, and I kind of went, oh my God, what have we here? But I just said, oh, look, I saw the sign for meditation, you know, do you run meditation? And I'd really love to come and learn. I'm a bit of a stressed young mum and I need something relaxing. And he said, oh yeah, okay, well, look, come back tomorrow night, we're starting a course. So I left the baby at home and the dog, and I went back the next night and actually had this very powerful experience, which was really quite beautiful. You know, in our culture, we're kind of tend to being visionary, you know, we go out on vision quests, you might call them, when we go through ceremonies, and we're supposed to see visions and things about the purpose and meaning of life. And this first night I'd actually had a vision and of something particular, and it was very, you know, it was like an epiphany for me, and I went home in a bit of a cloud. And from then on, I started to practice Raj Yoga meditation, learned it very well. You know, took the baby with me in the morning, took her down to the center, and, you know, we'd sit up the back of the room and she'd sleep. And I think she was only 6 months old or something at the time. She'd sleep, and I'd sort of go into this nice dream state. Of course, I didn't really understand what much of it was about at the time. I just really was very engrossed in this meditation because it was incredibly peaceful and relaxing. And combined with my experience of my cultural ceremonial life, it added an extra dimension that was really quite beautiful and strong. And it started to make me feel strong about myself too. You know, I lived in a world of journalists and politicians. My husband worked in the press gallery. He was a war correspondent journalist who went overseas a lot. I worked in foreign affairs. At the time, I was incredibly busy as a policy researcher. And I had this little baby as well. And, you know, I didn't have any family around. So it was a very stressful time for me. So doing this meditation was really such a great thing. And, you know, William had come home and he'd go off sailing to get over all the war that he had seen, you know, so I'd see him sort of 3 or 6 months of the year, and he'd be off at some war, photographing the war and doing his job the other 6 months. So my life was, you know, like that. And so I didn't want a life where I just went out and socialized with people and, you know, did everything else that people in my social circle did. I wanted something deeper and different. And starting to work in this women's refuge, I started to see life differently. You know, there were homeless women who were addicted. I had to take people to, you know, AA meetings and detoxes and all sorts of other stuff. So my life really became quite different to this sort of privileged middle class life of working in foreign affairs as a diplomat and, you know, living at the press club. So I started to have quite a big shift in my life, and it was a couple of years later this whole shift sent me into like a divorce and so on, you know, which was just inevitable, I guess. I had a complete 360 turnaround, you know, straight from that world, which I thought was the world that I was supposed to have. You know, you get conditioned into thinking when you get educated, you've got to have a job, a mortgage, a house, a car, husband, the kids and all of that, and you're supposed to, you know, that's supposed to be your life and be happy with it. And some of my sisters and brothers have been very happy with that, but I was not. And so I had a real catapult into a spiritual life, and I grabbed it with two hands. And, you know, I eventually started to, after my divorce, I started to go to India because I realized all these Brahma Kumaris, Raja Yoga people were going there for something specific purpose, and they weren't just going over there to like hang out for 2 weeks and meditate and do nothing, that there was something important going on. And I started then to really delve into the learning and really decondition myself from some of the things that I'd been taught in the Catholic Church about shame and guilt, and, you know, that we're less than the higher being and all of that, because in my culture we don't talk about that. As far as we're concerned in our spiritual lives, you are present to this higher being, and it loves you and has a lot of benevolence for you, and, you know, you have the same virtues as that being, and that your role on earth is to have relationships where you practice those virtues, and that's part of our cultural tradition. So I started to see that also in Raja Yoga and in the philosophy of Raja Yoga. So I didn't really have any trouble with putting the two together. You know, I didn't have to give up something in order to learn something that enhanced my cultural life. So the two things now have gone hand in hand since that time. So that's been what I've been doing since 1984, really, and more importantly, probably since the 1990s. I really went into it in a great deal and started to study it and do service overseas and do service. And I traveled the world as well with the Brahma Kumaris, doing service overseas in my field of work at the time, which became around recovery from addiction and trauma, which I got quite interested in and started to do academic research and teaching in, as well as writing about. And also was on my own personal journey of recovery. It was during the 90s that I also, you know, discovered that you could put priests in jail. And so I went about doing that, which was a huge spiritual journey, because I had to face bishops and archbishops in the Catholic Church and people before all of the redress schemes came into play. You know, the first priest I put in jail was in 1995. And it was a big deal. You know, the Catholic Church didn't want to do anything about it. It was the International Year of Indigenous People. So I kind of shamed them into settling with me and apologizing to my mother, who was quite devastated when she found out what was going on. And he was the first priest in Queensland to go to jail, and he had actually been somebody who fought on the front lines for land rights with Aboriginal people. So there were a lot of Aboriginal people who knew this man, and you know, he had abused me for a very long time. So it was quite an amazing journey, you know, and I had to do that journey on my own. I didn't have anybody else except myself and the higher power. And some of my Aboriginal relatives really supported me, you know, my grandfather and my grandmother out at Murujulu, and the Anangu people who were my friends there. And they were very supportive, but I found my biological Aboriginal family not to be, because it was a big shameful thing, you know, and it was, my mother was too devastated to even speak about it. So my spiritual life was a real powerful boulder for me to hold on to at the time. I really needed it to be able to have the courage to face all of that. And it was really hard, you know. I went to meetings with archbishops and lawyers by myself, and I hardly knew what I was doing. Even with my education, I just had no idea. And I was so emotionally traumatized that it was really not appropriate for me to be doing that on my own. I entered therapy, and as a result have become quite well from, you know, what happened, and have gone on to advocate for other Aboriginal people who have suffered the same fate at the hands of the Catholic Church. So, you know, what I found about spirituality was walking your talk is really important, being authentic and integral, maintaining harmony and peace in all of your relationships. And, you know, there's very strict laws in Aboriginal spiritual life about the maintenance of the harmony of the earth and the harmony of the land, because that's the way the land doesn't become reactive. If you look after country, if you look after the land, it responds to you in a healthy way, and you live in a healthy environment. And as a result, your body, your mind, your spirit is in a healthy environment. So all of those things are connected in an energetic way in our spiritual cultural lives as First Nations people. So the maintenance of Kanyini, which is our peace and harmony, is deeply important to us. So we don't just muck around and say, oh, that's what you've got to do and talk it. We actually walk it. So it's important that you're careful about your relationships, you're careful about your feelings, you're careful about the way in which you interact with other people, and that you keep a positive vibe and you try to resolve conflict. That, you know, one of the roles of being an elder is to become good at resolving conflict, to bring unity amongst people. So we look towards our elders to be our spiritual guides, and I look towards mine, as well as having the benefit of having my own self-determined journey through Raj Yoga, you know, which nobody else is involved in. That's my journey with my higher being, and that higher being I call Bayami because that's my language for it. And, you know, it's my relationship. We don't have gurus or teachers, and it's the same in First Nations culture. You have elders and you have cultural teachers, but they're teachers, you know, they're not your gurus. You don't sit at their feet and learn from them. You honour them and respect them, and they help you develop and grow into being a mature and healthy emotional adult. So I think I've talked enough from there. So I might just share the screen and show you something which talks about Didiri. So this will be quite a little 3-minute form of meditation that I'd like to take you through. So Didiri is our one of the things we teach children when they get to be around the age of 5 and they start to rationalise. We teach them the practice of deep listening to their feelings mainly, and expressing their feelings. We actually can do it a little bit earlier. It's something I use in my transformational leadership work now. And so Didiri helps us listen to our heart and our soul. And then it also teaches us how to be present to other people. So it's a spiritual practice. It's an active spiritual practice in the sense that you suspend all your own thinking and you just listen to yourself, or if you're in the presence of another person, you give them your full attention.
Miriam was the first person in Nauru to study and get a full education. She then became a school teacher, and she believed that education was the way forward. A lot of the children had painful stories from home lives. And she believed that if every child had an opportunity to good education, to education that would allow them to know themselves more deeply, that would start to solve many of the problems that we could see in our communities today.
Didiri, the deep inner spring inside us. We call on it, and it calls on us.
On the 26th of January in 1988, Miriam presented Didiri to the Australian nation. She presented it as a gift to all Australians. Dadidi is such an important part of Aboriginal lives because living on this continent, we've learnt to listen since our earliest times. Listening to our elders, listening to our youth. I don't think Australia has heard fully the pain and the distress that Aboriginal people have suffered in this country. Non-Aboriginal people in this country also carried their own pain, their own trauma. And so if we slow down and open ourselves up, we can start to heal that pain under the anger, under the distress. The concept and the activity and the force of Dadidi is important to us all. Dadidi just does not happen out in the bush, it happens everywhere, anywhere. Story maps, on the beach, sitting, listening and talking to each other. You can take your spouse, your friends, spend a night in listening to your children talk and tell stories. And as we do that across this country, healing starts to happen because every person wants to be heard, wants to be listened to, wants to know who they are. When I go to visit with Miriam, she's quiet in the way she sits. She has a beautiful energy, softness, but she can be incredibly strong. And she has a call, she's put out a call to us all. Let's listen at that deep level of who we are, what we have been, what we are now, and what we can become.
So I'd like you all to just sit still in the space in which you are in, whether you're on a chair or a couch, and just or on the floor, and just take the time to sit very still. And as you sit quietly, just feel the sense of breath coming into your lungs and out of your lungs. And listen to the self. You might want to close your eyes. You might want to leave your eyes open. It's up to you. But just listen to the sound of the self. Through first feeling, the feeling of the breath coming into the body and the breath leaving the body as your lungs rise and fall. Now just allow your mind to rest. And just gently let go of thought and focus the eyes on the point in front of you. And as you focus, imagine yourself to be still, to be at peace, to be a point, to be light. And allow all the thoughts, feelings and sounds around you to become still in this moment. So you focus the mind in the center of the self, the connection with everything. And just continue to feel your breath as you relax your body. And allow yourself to become still. You feel the energy of your mind, the energy all around you, coming into the center of space, into one thought, to the thought of peace, to be in a place of kanyini, harmony, and peace with the self. You don't need to do, you don't need to move, you don't need to think, you just need to be. And in being, be still. Feel the feelings you have inside yourself. And just allow them to be in the moment with you in this space of stillness. Within this place, we find strength. We find the self. And now just come back to the feeling of the air coming in and out of your lungs and your body. And allow the energy to come back into your body as you feel your lungs lift and fall. And bring yourself back into the present, into the place where you are, and into this waking moment. As you open your eyes and come back into this space. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about my specific journey then with Raj Yoga, because I'm sure people are often interested when Aboriginal people make a connection between their own spiritual, cultural lives and another spiritual path. Like some of my friends practice Buddhist meditation, or they practice, you know, their own Christianity or their own other forms of maybe a religion alongside their Aboriginal spirituality, and they don't find any clash with that. So I might now talk about some of the foundational laws of Aboriginal culture and why they don't clash, particularly with Raja Yoga, because not just the value system, but the actual, I think, spiritual laws as well as the spiritual practice. Now, Didiri is a spiritual practice of being still with the self, like we just did. That's Didiri, what we just did. And it's also about how we take that into our relationships, which does not clash with anything that I have learned in the philosophy of Raja Yoga. But let me take you a little bit through Aboriginal culture, I think, and our laws, which might help. So what I've been taught and what I know, and I've learned this from the people in the Central Desert, and also, you know, my other life as my other Waka Waka, we also have the same connection. The Anangu people of the Central Desert have a special relationship for all Aboriginal people because of their custodianship of Uluru Karajuta and the main areas of the Central Desert that are very powerful physical things on the earth of Australia, of Nunjanatia, but also because for many, many years they have kept hold of their cultural traditions and ceremonies and have not allowed white culture to take those from them. And it's been very important for us to maintain the Anangu way of being, because they hold the songlines for all Aboriginal people in our nation, because all our songlines, each nation's songlines goes through Uluru. And so it's a very important main sacred site in Australia. So the foundational spiritual laws of our culture belong to every clan, and they're practiced by every clan, but everybody has different languages and ceremonies, music, songs, dances and connections, and according to their songs and their stories. So these spiritual laws are the things that we start to teach children and learn when we're very young. So let's go to the next slide. And we call the law the Chukapa. So the first spiritual law that I learned, which is very strongly carried by the Waka Waka clan, is the 3 laws of respect. So the first law is respect and honour the self, the first part of this law, and we must do this first. So what we do is we acknowledge that we're a spiritual being and that we are spirit beings before we become human form, and we are only human form when we're on the planet. And when we die and go back to the Chukapa, which is in the star systems, that we are spirit beings without human form. And so it's only when we're on the planet that we have human form that we come here to have relationships. So this law helps us to be human in practice. So we respect and honour ourselves because we're spirit beings, because we exist, because we have all the virtues and knowledge within us that we need to become the sort of human being we might want to be, whatever that choice is. And we don't have the Christian view that we are less than God, so we don't carry the shame and guilt of original sin. We don't believe in original sin. We don't believe that we are less than, that we are different to the higher being because it is greater than us and it doesn't ever become human form. But it is the being that lives in the Chukapo, does not come onto the planet, and we honour and respect that relationship. So then when we're on the earth, we respect and honour the earth, Nunjanatia, our mother, the earth, because it gives us everything we need to survive as humans, and we must leave it in a good way for all the generations that follow us, not just the next one and the next one, but everyone that comes after, because we don't know how many generations come after us. And so we must leave the earth in a state. And that's why we have lots of laws that govern what we do in the environment, lots of practices that govern how we look after water, how we look after animals, the kind of songs and dances and ceremonies we do to make sure that it continues and sustains. We respect and honour others in our relationships because that's what we're here on the human plane for. We're here to learn how to be human and how to have relationships with other human beings. And so respecting and honouring others is a law that I learned to live all my life, and it takes a really long time to learn. So we honour our elders often because they've become very proficient at respecting and honouring others. They know how to respect and honour themselves. They've practiced it a lot in relation to other people. They put themselves first so they don't become codependent. Doesn't mean they're selfish or greedy. It means that if you love yourself, then you can love other people unconditionally, which is part of the law of Kanyini. So respecting and honouring others, even though it takes a long time, we just keep practicing until we become good at it. Kanyini is the next main law that we follow as a spiritual foundational law. So it's about the law of harmony and unconditional love. All our thoughts, words and actions have to be the same. So there's no hypocrisy. There has to be authenticity and integrity. We live as human beings in service of the world and service of others, because in that way we also serve ourselves. There are four main things to learning how to be in the world, and that is we learn these through family, through our chukapa, our law, through our belief system that we're taught, and through Nura, our land, through the relationship with land and animals and everything on it. In that way, we come to learn not to waste or create rubbish, and to not indulge in greed or do things that cause damage to the world, the earth, the environment, or other people. All right, so the next, Kanyini is very important law. The next one is Napaji Napaji. It's understanding that there is mutual reciprocity between us all, and that as human beings, we live on the earth where we share and care. This is a very subtle law in action because it's about giving and receiving, and it's about sharing and caring. So we look after children if their parents die. Nobody says, oh, leave them alone, send them to an orphanage. We take them in, you know, we treat them as our family. Everybody in our nation and our clan is our family, not just the family. And that's laid down in the moieties and the kinship system. So you're related to everybody and there's a relationship. So you don't leave a person on their own. And it acknowledges that there is this energy of reciprocity between the way in which we live with each other, and that we must take care of each other. And this also acknowledges our relationship to animals and food as well. Okay, so we have as the center of our way of being the idea of a circle, and we always have circles in our relationships as community. We share with each other in talking circles. It's a place where people have to speak the truth and practice the laws and learn to live in harmony. We also expect children after the age of puberty initiation are now becoming adults and grown-ups, so they're expected to express their opinion and to start learning the politics of life in a spiritual cultural community where everything is important, and particularly about how we have relationships where we create harmony and resolve conflict. So it's about that mutual reciprocity, respect and caring. So these are the spiritual foundations of our culture. We practice our spirituality in a very practical way because we see it as relationship with the self, with others, and with the earth and with the animals. And so even though people say sometimes that Aboriginal and First Nations religions are based around animism because we have such a relationship with animals, it's really much deeper than that. It's about, you know, this relationship in the environment, on the earth, with all living things, that when we come down here, there's an important relationship that we have as the humans on the top of the evolution scale, you might say. It's our important role to look after animals, earth, land, and other things for all the generations to come after us. So in terms of Raja Yoga, you know, I learned many things about their practice. So not only do they practice open-eyed meditation and do service for the world, but they have particular philosophies about how we came about, how we're supposed to live in the earth, how we're supposed to relate to each other, and what's going to happen in the future. So some of those stories are very present in Aboriginal culture. So we have myths and legends that talk also about the transformative nature of the earth and how things change in the environment and how the earth changes and how people come and go. And so there's you know, we believe in reincarnation, for example, which is similar. And we believe that you have lives where you come here to learn how to be a good human being in relation to the earth and in relation to people. So I you know, at first I thought, what do they mean, these cycles of time? You know, I couldn't quite figure that out, because in our way, we don't really think about time, and we don't have any words for time. And so, you know, we just believe that we've been here forever and we're just going to continue forever. And so I found it really funny when people would talk about the golden age and the iron age and the copper age and the silver age and all of this other stuff. And I'm like, what does this mean? But over, you know, 30, 40 years that I've had in practicing Raj Yoga and learning the knowledge, I've come to understand that there are parallels and there are explanations that have enabled me to at least understand and translate across both, so that I could come to understand and put the two in the places where they needed to be in my own mind and my own spiritual practice. So today, you know, my spiritual practice is very simple. It's about practicing meditation, practicing Dadiri, having a purpose in the world for service in the life, not just to myself and my family, but to other people. And many people in the world do service in many, many different ways. I've done service specifically for the Brahmin community in the outside world through leadership practice that I've done. I work as a transformational leadership consultant. You know, I do work around sacred leadership because the leaders of the Brahma Kumaris, who are all women or have been women, the main ones, who run the university in my lifetime, have been particularly inspirational to me, a bit like Jikatu and my First Nation elders. You know, they have a high level of consciousness that I've learned about in sacred leadership theory. And that high level of consciousness is emotional intelligence at a very high spiritual level. And I've seen it in practice in them, and they've inspired me to want to practice it in my own life and to transform myself so that I could. And also, you know, it's been incredibly healing for me. I could not have done all the things I did earlier that I talked to you about without the power of the practice that I had through Raj Yoga, but also through the strength of my ceremonial cultural connections to land and to my family and my own cultural background. All of these things made me strong. And I believe, you know, in my work as a sacred leadership consultant, that the spiritual intelligence is really what brings the higher level of consciousness, and it enables us to integrate ourselves with everything, with the environment, with our impact on other people. So, you know, if I was running a company like Nike, for example, you know, what's my impact on, if I'm using labor in China and those people are not getting paid a decent wage or getting decent, then I have a consciousness about that. And it's very important that I think about what my company's impact will have other parts of the world and the environment. For example, if I was running a huge oil company, what is my impact on people? What is my impact on families? What is my impact on politics, on a country? All of these things are important in sacred leadership. And I've seen that inspiration in the leaders of the Brahma Kumaris, many of whom I've known who've passed now, who showed that leadership in practice, and the depth of it, you know, was very strong. So it enabled me to learn how to face things in my own life, things that would have, you know, were definitely difficult, but also enabled me to want to seek a higher level of consciousness and a higher way of being, you know. And I'm definitely not perfect at it, you know. I'm a human, and, you know, I have to live in relationship with other people, and so, you know, daily I make mistakes, but it's about learning and transformation, and it's about trying, and it's about doing and knowing and doing and becoming. It's really about becoming. So for me, I think, you know, it's about my becoming, and I will keep learning until the day I leave this body and go to the Chukapa, and, you know, to meet my ancestors. And so, and it may continue in the next life as well, you know, that learning continues throughout life, and we carry it from life to life. So the Brahma Kumaris have taught me another way of being in the world that's wider and broader than just First Nations knowledge, which has really helped me in a way navigate other parts of the world. And I find myself, you know, I've learned how to be in times of chaos, to be able to manage myself in those times of chaos. That has been the most important thing for me, because I didn't manage myself very well when I was much younger. I didn't have the ways or the means or the knowing of that. And my life has been about wanting to learn and to try to become more and be in a place of higher consciousness. And now I get to do it on a daily basis in my work, which I really love. So I think that's me. I think that's all I should say now, Gabrielle.
Tjanara, that was such deep sharing. Thank you very, very much. And I have to say, I really loved your TED talk, Sacred Leadership, What If Leaders Were Humble? And Jan's going to put that in the chat box. Tjanara did a TED talk following her about a PhD on sacred leadership. A great question, what if our leaders were humble? So Jan will put that in the chat box so you can check it out later on. Tjanara, we do have a couple of questions, and which I'd love to be able to pitch to you. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah, look, someone's saying here, when I tune into the seasons amidst huge, you know, climate change, floods, bushfires, the dust storms, thunderstorms, and so on, what does it mean to be a custodian of the earth?
Yeah, that's a really deep question, you know. Many, many years ago, my elders used to, you know, were teaching, part of my line is rainmakers and looking after water, the water under the earth. And they teach you to become the water, you know, not to just feel it and think about it intellectually, but you have to become it in order to make it rain, you know, in order to make it come. And so I think it's very hard for people who have not been involved in learning how to practice that. It's hard to know how to look after the environment and the land, and you can look after the surface of it, you know, you can look after the earth and the environment and plant trees and so on, but to actually feel it to such a depth that you feel it like that is a very powerful thing. It's actually really hard to explain in English. It's really not something, actually it's more something you would sing about, because it's hard to explain it in an intellectual way. But certainly that was, you know, something I had to learn for 25 years in order to make rain. And, you know, now I can sing a song that makes rain when it's necessary to make rain. And it's a sacred thing, so we don't do it just randomly, let's make rain. But we do understand the environment of the earth in terms of its weather. We have a very deep understanding, and we have very deep insight into what the signs look like on the earth, what the signs look like in the sky. You know, when the clouds are dark, what is the meaning of that? And when things are moving, if the ants are running, you know, if you see the little animals scurrying, well, everybody knows something's going on. If you see the birds flying in a certain way or a certain formation, we're taught these things. We're taught how to notice, and then we're taught how to ask what's going on and to find out what it means. And then we see it in evidence for year after year after year and season after season. And so then we know that that's the way the earth is going to be. And then if something is shifting, we feel the vibration in the earth. So I can feel the vibration in the rain before it even comes across the Kimberleys on its way here, because we're taught to feel the deep vibration of what's going on in the earth. So to be a custodian of the earth is to have such a deep level of energy connection to it that you feel it like that. And when you feel it like that, it's like you feel when you hold a baby, you know. I don't know if you all done that, but maybe you should. But when you feel to hold your own baby, you have this deep sense. That's the only thing I can connect it to, really. I had the same sense about the earth. I can feel its energy in such a way that I love it unconditionally. And we're taught that Nunjanatia feels that way about us. The earth feels that way about us. It's like we're her children. We have come here to be her children. And she gives her life for us and lies across the centre of Australia. Her womb is in Uluru. She's live and energetic, and we feel her vibration. And so to be custodian of the earth is to feel underneath your feet the way the land vibrates on it when you walk. And when you stand on a song line, the energy and the vibration on a song line or a sacred site is different to the energy and the feeling on the earth just in another place. So there's a song line here in Canberra where Parliament House is, and you can stand your foot on one side of it and feel the energy of that song line, and put your foot outside of it on the other and not feel that energy at all. And I sometimes take people down there when we're doing Ngangri healing, because you can actually lie on that song line and heal people. That's how powerful the song lines are. So to be a custodian of the earth is to have such a deep relationship with it that it shifts with you and you shift with it. And you don't have to be First Nations to feel that. You just have to have somebody help you learn how to do it, which is a First Nations person could. But also you can teach yourself how to be in it by having that deeper sensitivity to the earth, and you can start to feel it, because if we can do it, you can do it. We're all human. It's just that we've practiced it longer and we know how to teach other people how to do it. So, you know, I've taken people down and laid them on the songline and said to them, can you feel the energy of it, and taught them how to feel the energy so that they can then use the energy for their own self to heal. So, you know, it's a powerful thing to be the custodian of something. And like, I'm the custodian of making rain, and so I'm one of them. There's many of us, and you know, I have to be cognizant of when the energy's in the earth, and when it's time, when the earth needs so much to have rain, that it's now time to give it rain. And it has to be within the natural course of things. I'm not allowed under the law to just go out and be willful and egotistical and go, oh, I think I'll show off and make rain today. No, we sing it according to our feelings, we sing it according to the signs, and we sing it according to the need to the earth. And when we see all these things happening to the earth, we feel them deeply. And many of our elders talk about when the earth is sick, we are sick, because it's the practice and the way we be in the world that makes the earth sick. So if I act out of greed and ego and you know, or if I put too much violence into the world, those things will come back out through the world. You know, so there'll be volcanic eruptions, there'll be tsunamis, there'll be tornadoes. Those things are often in response to the practice of humanity. And I mean, this is our belief system. You don't have to believe it. And I'm not telling you this to make you afraid or scared. But we know that if we practice harmony and peace, the earth will stay in response to us in harmony and peace. That's how much power we have as spiritual beings. So if you practice that, it will actually transform your world, and it will transform your relationship to the earth. I hope that helps.
Tjanara, that was a very deep response, and I could really feel what you were saying as you were speaking too. So thank you for sharing that. There was another question, and maybe you've touched on it, but someone's saying, can you talk about the song lines? Is there anything more that you'd like? You did mention that anyway, but you may want to say.
Yeah, so the song lines are actually physically located on all the magnetic grid lines of the earth. And we call them song lines because when the Wandjina ancestors came in what, I know and the Brahma Kumaris talk about is the golden age, they came to the earth from the Chukapa, from another place, from the star systems. And they came here on light, and they traveled around the earth on the magnetic grid lines. They used their energy and the energy of those magnetic grid lines and the light to travel. And as they traveled across the earth, they embedded in the earth through singing the law of our land. So they actually embedded it in the whole earth, not just in Australia. We just happened to hold on to it for a long time. And so as they traveled and they sang, they embedded the law into the song lines. And when they left, the song lines closed up so the energy of the law would stay in the song lines forever, for a period of time, until the song lines had to open up and release that energy, because all the people on the earth had created such destruction that we needed the power and the positive energy of the song lines. And that happened, some decades ago. And so the energy of the song lines has been opened up in order for us to utilize it to help the earth transit through difficult physical times like we are having now. And the song lines cover the whole of Australia. They all traverse Uluru because each nation clan has its own song line or groups of song lines that travel across its country. And they, all the sacred sites belonging to that clan are located on song lines. So they're not made up, they're not random, they're in particular places. And they're sacred for certain reasons that belong to that clan. And that's secret, sacred knowledge that we don't share with anyone outside of those who are allowed to know it. And so what we do know about the song lines is that when the Wandjinas left, then the woman, Nunjanatia, who gave birth to all the spirit beings that would come down and become human on the earth, laid down across Australia when she gave birth. And she laid down, and she still physically is in the formation of the earth in Australia. She looks like a woman across the planet, across the country. And so her womb is in Uluru, and it's a sacred part of Uluru where it is. And so she continues to sustain the human race and the growth and borning of children of First Nations people in Australia. So we will keep borning children, that will not die, that will not finish. And so the song lines maintain the line of First Nations clan and knowledge. We will never die out because she is always there. And we always have this relationship with the Wandjina ancestors and the Chukapa through the connection of the song lines. And when you stand on the song line, because it's a magnetic energy grid line that holds the earth, it holds the earth in its space. And the earth is currently sort of like this off its axis. So it has very strong energetic pull. So song lines have very strong energy when you stand on them or lie on them or sit on them. And so, they still exist and they will always be there. And that's what they're there for. They're there for us. They hold our law. They help us never to forget, because we go to sacred places on song lines when we do our ceremonial stuff. And, we sing the songs that belong in the song lines. And so this constant singing and ringing produces this vibration and energy in the earth in Australia that just continues and continues, and it doesn't finish. It finishes for a little while when people die and don't sing the songs, but then the songs come back because people start to connect with culture and they can feel it, and the songs do come back as people sing their language, and that will all come back. but it's never lost. It's never. So a stolen generation person, for example, can go find their country through their songline.
Tjanara, thank you for that. Look, there's a lot of comment in the chat. I'll read a couple, so many people thanking you very deeply. Tjanara, thank you so much for such a powerful, inspiring message and for the courage in sharing your story. Another one, amazing, thank you. I would love to learn more from the Indigenous peoples. But there's a lot of them coming and saying these sorts of things, so very much appreciated. We've got time for a couple more questions if we could, please. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
You're happy to take them. This one is one very topical for today. And they're saying, Tjanara, my question is, how can I help people with COVID in a COVID situation now where they are close family that are affected? Are there some traditional remedy or methods to help others? Please tell me your thoughts.
So, you know, I really feel like in situations like this where there's a lot of fear and, you know, we don't know a lot about this virus, and it's like a new one that's probably going to be around with us just like the flu. I don't know, like I'm not a doctor expert. But from a, you know, a medicine nunkery point of view in our culture, for healing, it's always good to have a person in a place of peace, in a space of peace. And so when a nunkery practices, for example, on a person to give traditional healing, the first thing they do is use the energy that they harness to put that person's physical, mental, emotional, and social, spiritual being into a place of peace. You know, so I practice as a nunkery, and so I would use the energy that I would be channeling and bringing forward to put the person's physical body into a place of peace, and that peace will then come to their mind and to their heart and to their spirit. So I think it's very beneficial for everyone at this time, especially when there's so much fear of uncertainty around, to go and do things that are deeply peaceful, such as meditation, to put somebody into, to put yourself and to put that other person in a place of calmness and stillness, because it's in calmness and stillness that we can use our mind to enable us to manage our feelings and to manage what's going on around us so that we don't panic. You know, the eye of the storm they all talk about, the eye of the storm is the calm place and the storm is all around. And, you know, I had a sailor husband who often went into the eye of storms. I mean, literally, he enjoyed going through cyclones. How amazing is that? You know, I think he loved the adrenaline, but to sit in the eye of a storm was very peaceful. And it's a very powerful place to be within your own self. So in this time, to put yourself in a place of peace and stillness, and to be at peace with the fact that this is just what the world has to have happen right now. You know, it's like the stock market goes up and down. It's like rivers go up and down. It's like rain comes and goes. It's like fire comes, bushfires come, and these things come. You know, we are subject as human beings to many things that can affect our bodies, our mind, our heart, our physical bodies. And so to manage those kind of things, you have to be present to them and still and calm. So I would suggest that, you know, that I think that's the most beneficial thing to do. That's what I've done with it. And I can say that I'm at peace with anything that goes on. And I read the news daily to find out what's going on. And I don't get afraid, and I don't fall apart, and I don't panic and, you know, get all involved too much in the whole rigmarole of it. It's like, I understand that this is what's meant to happen right now. And in the acceptance of that, then I can be at peace with it.
Thanks, Tjanara. Here's another comment. Yes, I would love to learn more from the Indigenous people. I feel sad that all this wisdom and learning may be lost. So just on that, I want Jan to put in the chat box an interview that Independent Australia did a great review of Tjanara's book, A Long Way from No Go. And Tjanara spoke on radio, I think it was, about that Yeah, it was. So we'll put that link in the chat box for you to pick it up. It's really worth listening to. And of course, read the book. Read the book. Tjanara, there's 2 more questions here that I think it would be lovely if we let's stretch time. And this is a little bit about time. It's saying, what is the dreamings? Is it both the past and the present? Maybe I might be asking a question about time here.
Okay, sure. So the idea of time, you know, time, we don't have any words in all the languages. We kind of have words that go around it, but they don't actually specifically indicate that time is this. You know, this is a very Western concept, the Gregorian clock and all of that. It's very Western concept, this linear concept of time. We have sort of circular concept of time, and that there are parallel places and parallel spaces, you know, and the Chukapa, for example, is that space all out there. That is the spiritual space that surrounds us. So it's part, my Mui, for example, my aura, my Mui is part of the Chukapa space, but it's also the space all out there in the universe. It's where the stars are, you know, it's where Bayami lives in the Chukapa, for example. So the Chukapa is kind of a parallel, you might say universe or space. I'm not quite sure what to call it in English, but it's definitely, you know, we say it's up there, out there in the stars, and it's up where our ancestors are as well. So it's out beyond the physical earth is really what I can say. It's a space that is devoid of negativity. It's a space that is full of light. And so the Chukapa is that place where we'd always be at peace, where our soul and our spirit would feel free from human form. And so in relation to time, we don't see time as a sort of flat linear thing with centuries and, you know, AD and BC or any of that. Time actually doesn't exist. So we try to live in our minds in a way with that perspective. The only place, I mean, I try to do it when I bring it home back to Canberra, but when I go out to Uluru, which I do a number of times a year, and I only just came back actually a few weeks back, I went out to visit my relatives, is out there in that nothingness of the desert where there's just the Uluru and Katajuda and Yulara, the 5-star resort, which doesn't mean anything, is just nothing, you know, it's stillness in itself. And it's the most powerful sort of emptiness of stillness and calmness that it actually transforms you. And so it's a timeless space. So I go and be in that space on a regular basis so I can feel the way that feels. And then I can bring that back here to this place and be here in this place, no matter what's going on, still be in that timeless space. So we're taught from an early in our lives. And this was really quite the strongest thing I had to overcome between learning to work between 2 cultures, especially with having to go to work all the time, you know, between 9 and 5 or whatever, was we operate on spiritual time. We call it Murray time. And we go when we have an intuitive feeling to go. That's the time for doing that. That's the time for going there. And my grandmother and grandfather and everybody out there, they all live by that. So they don't wear watches or clocks. They just turn up when they're supposed to. And they know when they're supposed to be somewhere and they just turn up. And people just wait because they know that that's the way it is. And that's how we live. So when I come back here, I try to live by Murray time a lot, you know. I try to use my intuition, which is that part of your mind, that power that knows when you have to be there or be there or be there. You know, I might have a diary, but like it's just to make sure I don't forget something, because I have so many things on. So we don't have a concept of linear time. We have a concept of circular time. So that means we're alive forever. You know, we go round and round in our lives. We reincarnate. And we have relationships with all sorts of different people over time, over that period of time. And so we try to live like a spirit being in this world, like we are when we're in the Chukapa, where there is a timelessness. I hope that helps. I know it's hard to understand and talk about it anyway using English words. It's kind of, if it's a feeling, it's something you have to feel.
People are understanding it. The comments in the chat box are saying they very much like what you're saying, Tjanara. So you know
what
that's
a nice world it would be.
Look, we've got another question, and then I wondered if we could do a meditation with you and before we close out. So this one is saying, I really like Darari, the deep listening to my own emotions and feelings and those of others. And I'm cautious of celebrating Australia Day on the 26th of January because the impact of colonisation is still very present. What spiritual ritual or special practice could we do on that day instead that would bring harmony and equality and a better way of being together?
I think it'd be great if you created some ceremony for yourself and your friends and family or whoever you want to do that with on the 26th that would enable you to acknowledge the past, to maybe accept the grief and loss and that Aboriginal people will be having on that day because they truly feel it. And to maybe, you know, it's a time for saying sorry for that because you didn't make it happen, but you are benefiting from the colonisation of Australia, and maybe making a contract or a promise to be supportive in some way to the process of sovereignty and self-determination or some other thing. Whatever you feel you can make a promise for. I think that would be a way, you know, to do a sort of atonement for the past and willingness to go into the future, you know, holding hands and creating some type of harmony on country with us so that we can all move forward together. You know, because it is a very political and contentious time and it's hard. It's hard, you know. When the 26th comes around, I always think, you know, will I go down to the 10 embassy? Will I go to the march? Will I do this? Will I do that? It's just, I'm always so torn between my spiritual, cultural feeling and then my political feelings for it, you know. So I think it'd be great if you did something, you know, even if it's to throw a flower into the river, you know. Like I sometimes just like to go and sit down by the lake on the 26th and think about my grandparents and think about my great-grandparents and, you know, just give honour and gratitude to them for holding on to my culture so that I could keep it. I'm so grateful, so grateful. I can't tell you how grateful I am to have been born into the family and the life that I have been born into. I'm very grateful. And so I try to have gratitude on that day and not to really just see it. I mean, I understand the process of imperialism and colonisation. It had to happen. It's part of the story and the history. I spent much of my life trying to understand it so I could let go of it. So I don't get carried away, you know, with the idea of colonisation and try to beat people around the head with it. But it's important that we acknowledge a lot of suffering happened and a lot of people still suffer because of it. And so it's important to help that recovery, I think, and to acknowledge, even in acknowledging by saying sorry, but acknowledging the sovereignty and the rights of Aboriginal people as humans in their own land is something that helps create a healing for that process.
Yes, thank you. So that's a lovely opportunity, a lovely strategy there that Tjanara's given to us. And I think 26th of January is only, 4 days away. So put that one in your diary. A lovely way to engage on that day in a very, very positive way that enables self-determination and self-sovereignty to people of First Nations. Tjanara, thank you for that. We've got time for a meditation. Would you like to lead us in another meditation?
Yes, I wanted to take you all on a journey, actually, a journey of visualization in a way as a form of meditation. So just sit quietly in the space that you're in. And just relax in the chair that you're in. Just get comfortable, and I want you can either close your eyes or leave your eyes open. It's up to you, whatever suits you first. And I want you to think about listening to the feeling of your lungs, the air coming in and out of your lungs, and what it feels like as your chest rises and falls. And we are now going to go on a journey. on a journey across country with each other, your companions in this seminar today. And just listen to the music as you feel the feeling of air coming into your lungs and going out of your lungs, sitting quietly in the place where you are. And just allow the air to relax your body, to relax your mind and each part of your physical body. Let everything relax. Let your arms and feet relax, and just allow yourself to gently breathe. Breathe in and breathe out. And feel that energy going in and leaving your body. And now I just want you to imagine that you are walking through a forest. We are walking across the moist leaves on a forest path. This is a beautiful green rainforest in Australia. Beautiful tall rainforest trees. When we are walking through the forest, we can feel the sun on our faces as it comes through the canopy of trees above your head. You can see the light through the canopy of the trees. Feel the moisture in the air. Hear the sounds of birds in the distance. Little critters in the grass. You can feel the leaves crunch under your toes. Feel the eucalyptus in your nostrils. And now just walk with all your companions down the forest path, quietly and gently. As it takes you through the rainforest, you begin to hear the sounds of water in the distance. Come closer and closer to the sounds of water, become louder and louder. And in amongst the sound of water, you hear the sounds of men singing, with didgeridoo in the background. And as you come, you begin to come out of the clearing of the rainforest. And in front of you, you see the river. You can smell the water of the river and the moisture in the air. You can feel the wet sand under your feet as you come along to the banks of the river. And as you get closer to the river, you can see that this river is a golden river. And now just allow yourself to see in front of you the beauty of this golden river. As you walk down the banks of the river, allow your feet to go into the water, and then allow your body to gently drift. You feel the warmth of the water. The water is warm. And on the other side of the riverbank, you hear the sound of Aboriginal men singing, welcome you to their river. And now allow your body to just float in the water as the water holds you buoyant. And just allow yourself to flow with the river. And as you flow with the river, let your hands and your feet stretch. Let your fingers and your toes feel the rhythm of the water as it runs across your body. And just roll your body around in the water and let it freely let go. For this is a healing river. And they welcome you to their healing river for all the healing you need today. And as you stretch out your hands and your arms and your legs, just allow yourself to think of anything you would like to let go of today. And just imagine now what that is in your mind. It might be something in your heart. It might be something in your physical body. It might be something in your life that you need to let go of. Now just bring that to your mind and decide to let go of it into the water. Give it now to the golden river, for this is a healing river. And feel it leave your body, feel it leave your mind, feel it leave your heart as you allow yourself to let go. Now feel the joy of release and relaxation And allow your body to flow with the current until you hear the sound of my voice again. Just enjoy the feeling that the water gives you. Now as the current takes you down the stream, you listen to the sounds of singing in the distance. And the current gently brings you to the banks of the river. As you feel a newness in your body, newness in your heart and your mind. Now the current just brings you gently to the banks of the river, and allow yourself to climb out of the river into the sunlit day. And just stretch your body and release. And let the sun dry your body as you walk up the bank of the river. And in front of you, you see lined up a group of elders, of men and women. And you notice in their hands they hold something for you. In their hands they have a gift for you, for your willingness to let go, your wanting to heal yourself, to grow and to be free. And now walk up to an elder as they give you a gift. And they hand the gift to you, take it in your hands and hold it. For this is a gift for you to take, for you to use from here on in some way that you need in your life. Now take your gift in silence and thank them with your eyes. And hold your gift with you as you and your companions begin to walk back through the rainforest and up through the forest path as you feel the moisture of the leaves under your feet and you hear the sound of the rain, you hear the sound of the river going into the distance, and you feel the feelings of moisture of small raindrops on you as you walk through the forest. The sun is coming through the canopy of trees above your head. And the sound of the singing begins to echo in the distance. And know that you can come back to this place, to this golden river, at any time in your life that you feel you need it. And now walk up through the rainforest, quietly and gently with your companions, holding your gift. And as you walk up through the rainforest, you begin to feel your body. And just feel the air coming in and out of your lungs. Notice the energy coming back into your toes and your feet, into your fingers and your hands, into your forehead and into your head. And just allow yourself to gently awaken the energy of your body coming back into the present moment. And when you are ready, open your eyes and just keep your gift with you for the future.
Ngā mihi, Tjanara, thank you. A huge thanks to you. What a beautiful journey you've taken us on, sharing your story with us. So many comments from those listening too. Deep appreciation. Someone saying here, I would love this commentary. Please share it. Thank you so much, as you've touched my heart. So, Tjanara, our deep thanks to you. Before we close, or as we close out tonight, Tjanara is going to close with a song. But just before that, I'd like to tell you about the next episode of Open Your Eyes to the Universe. As always, I want to let you know about our online bookshop, Eternity Inc., which has got a full range of books on self-empowerment and spirituality, and always at not-for-profit prices. You also may like to subscribe to Open Your Eyes to the Universe to receive a monthly updates. If you want to do that, please email us at special.events@au.brahmakamaris.org. And I'd also like to tell you about our next episode in February. We'll be joined by Philippa Blackham, based in England, and Angelica Fangel, based in Chile, and Maureen O'Connor from Ireland, living in Australia. And they'll be joining me on Open Your Eyes to the Universe in a conversation on exploring the feminine. So that's on Saturday, the 26th of February at 6 p.m. So we're going to close out tonight with, as I mentioned, a song from Tjanara. And until we see you again in February, may you abide by the First Nations laws of humanity. Respect and honour yourself, respect and honour others, respect and honour the earth. Think peacefully, speak respectfully, and walk gently. Ka kite anu. Om Shanti.
Kapina kinchuanu kun peyuna unula minuba kuna tanana ka